Happy New Year. Welcome to the first episode of 2026 of Spritz of Wisdom. I'm feeling so energetic, so fired up, so motivated. I love the energy of this time of year, and it's the perfect segue for my sip of the week. These are my highs and lows of the previous week living here in South Italy. Let's begin with the highs, shall we? And of course, they are connected with Christmas and New Year. And in a way, I have to be honest with you, the festive season hasn't quite finished yet here in Italy. And this is where I think Italy differs to other countries around the world, because we have another bank holiday on January the 6th, which is Epiphany. And so as a result, normality doesn't really return here in Italy until January the 7th. So there's this extra week that Italians usually have. And especially with the way that New Year has fallen this year, we've been on a Thursday. Any Italians that had to work have been quite smart and have booked the Friday and the Monday off, which has resulted in this really long stretch of time, like this bridge, which is what they call it here in Italy. So it kind of feels like we're still in the slow, festive New Year vibes for at least another week anyway, especially at the time of filming, because this is January the 2nd. So yeah, it's interesting. I definitely feel like at this time of year in other countries, it's back to business, back to work, getting back into the swing of things. But here in Italy, it just takes that little bit longer, you know? But I have really, really enjoyed having this time off, being able to just disconnect, not having to always think about creation, but paradoxically actually feeling my most creative because I'm not thinking about it, and just being present, eating good food, spending time with great people. Like, it has just been a really lovely period, and I've decided that I want to adopt this practice at other times of the year. I don't just want to wait for the permission slip of Christmas and New Year to roll round, because I really do think it's the one time of the year where, because so many people slow down, you kind of feel like you should as well. I want to feel like this at other times of the year as well, even if it's just for like a weekend or the odd day here and there, because how I feel now, having had this little break, is so good that I know it can only benefit me if I can do this more often. So definitely something for me to take forward into this year. Absolutely. Now, in terms of lows of the past week, it's to do with the fireworks. Now, this is something that has really been grating on me a little bit, because the province that we've moved to, well, they love a firework. Now, it was the same in Palermo, I would say, definitely. Like, people would pop off the fireworks. Every midnight, I'd hear them in my area, and my boyfriend would say it's a running joke, somebody's been released from prison. But here in the Salerno province, I actually think it could be worse, because when there are events and celebrations, people exaggerate beyond measure. If you think about it, of course, New Year's Eve, you expect that there are going to be firework displays, but they began from the afternoon before it had even gotten dark. And then they continued into the early hours of the morning. So like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., people are still like popping off the fireworks. And you're like, why? We've had the whole midnight celebration, you know? And the reason I say this is because I love to watch a firework display. I think it's so beautiful. However, Tina is really, really scared of fireworks. And consider we completely changed our New Year's Eve plans this year. So we did the celebration in the reverse. We spent time with our friends in the afternoon, having drinks, playing cards, games, etc., into the early evening. And then when it really got into the night, we basically barricaded ourselves in our home. You know, we had music playing. We tried to soundproof it as much as possible to make Tina feel more relaxed. But unfortunately, there were just so many firework displays, it was a little bit impossible. And she spent, I would say, nigh on 3 hours solidly barking, which was really upsetting to see, because she just got so distressed. But then on top of that, I read in the news the next day, in the city of Salerno itself, there was actually a dog that died from the shock of the fireworks. And specifically because there are certain fireworks here where you throw them onto the ground and they make this huge noise. And I think it was the shock of that caused this dog to die. And it's really, really sad. You know, like, there's a big investigation now to try to understand exactly what happened. But it's interesting because the different mayors within the province, there were 2 different mayors in particular who signed ordinances, which are like legal regulations, to stop the sale of these particular types of fireworks that make so much noise around this time, in order to protect animals and vulnerable people, basically. But it's a discussion that I think people are starting to wake up to, because there is a sense of beauty with using fireworks and celebrations, absolutely. But there are kind of ways that we can do it. And I feel like other countries are starting to lead the way in showing how we can do this better in the future. Like, I can't remember if it was Dubai or China. I don't remember where I've seen this, but I've seen something on YouTube of this amazing fireworks display using just LED lights. So it was absolutely spectacular, but there wasn't a single sound. And I think that is the future. Goodness knows when it will ever arrive here in Italy, but people are starting to wake up to this now, because there's one thing about keeping hold of tradition, but then there's another to balance it with like the impact it has on people and animals, you know? So with that said, let's move into the full pour of today's episode. And it is something which actually I came across whilst I was having this break. I took a little bit of time to go onto Instagram and to just consume rather than create for once. And I came across a reel that the algorithm had served me. And I watched this reel and it just sparked so much kind of debate within me that I exited the app. I was reflecting on it. I was thinking about it. And then when I went back into the app to try to find this person again, I couldn't remember the name or anything. But essentially, this reel was of a woman. I can't remember. She was either American or Canadian, who is living in Tuscany. And she was given a house tour of her little apartment in Tuscany because after 2 years, she was having to leave to move into another one, which I think she said was going to be a bit bigger. But just some of the things she said in this reel actually created a bit of heated discussion from Italian people in the comments of the reel itself. But I'll give you an example. She was talking about the cost of this apartment, and she was like, and it's 1,000 euros. It's so cheap considering where we live. Some of the people in the comments had literally been like, for a normal average Italian person, I can tell you that 1,000 euros, especially for a home that tiny, is not cheap. And this is the kind of crux of what I want to talk about today, is not understanding the cultural landscape when you speak, when you comment, when you are producing content. And this is where I think so many people who move to Italy and indeed to any country around the world get it wrong, and they make life hard for themselves because they do not understand the intricacies of life in that country. I can tell you, especially here in the south of Italy, where wages are probably some of the lowest in the entire country, 1,000 euros a month for rent could be as much as 80% of what that person earns in a month if they are lucky. And so for somebody to just say so kind of blasé on a reel, oh, it's so cheap, kind of disrespects those people who don't have that kind of money and can only dream of living somewhere like that, yet they come from this country. There is just so much interwoven into this. And I just think people are so flippant with the words that they speak, but they don't ever give context. I know that in the past, I have drawn plenty of comparisons to the cost of living here compared to the UK, etc. However, I have come to learn the longer I have lived here that everything is relative and that it doesn't make any sense for me to draw these comparisons now because the money I earn in this country is the lowest I've probably ever earned in my entire life. And so why am I drawing these comparisons? Because it really doesn't make any sense to do so. But you have to give context with what you say. I'm not saying that you cannot ever compare the cost of things or compare life. But it helps sometimes if you have some respect in terms of actually being like, this is my experience based on where I come from. You know, I know it's not the same for everyone. Now, another thing that she went on to talk about in this reel was the condition of the home. And she said something along the lines of, and I can't believe that all homes here in Italy are furnished. And it took someone in the comments to be like, I think where you're living is on a transitory lease, and that's the reason you have to leave, and that's the reason it's furnished, which I think is true. Because let me tell you, I've been living here for 7 years. I've lived in a number of different homes. The last 2 homes, the one I'm in now and the one I lived in before, were complete shells. We had to fit everything out ourselves, particularly with the one we live in now. The one we lived in before did have some furniture that the previous owners had left, but it was vintage. It was nothing to shout home about, you know? And the rest of the things we had to purchase ourselves. But it was interesting to see this because if you were to watch something like that and not know much about the country, you might very well believe that this is true. But let me tell you, in Italy, a fully furnished home is rare. They do exist. One of the homes that I lived in Salerno was completely fully furnished, but generally they are less common and they're more of a premium price as a result. And usually they are only for short-term lets. That is the reason why they are fully furnished. It's interesting. It's so interesting to hear people do this kind of thing. They produce this kind of content, but they don't really understand the cultural landscape enough. And I guess what I want to highlight here is that you need to dig deep with the research of a place when you decide to move somewhere, when you are living somewhere, and really understand a place at a deeper level, particularly if you're not working here, particularly if the only reason you're here is just to enjoy life. I think when you're working here, you see things from a different perspective because you're usually earning an Italian salary, which isn't fantastic unless you have a particularly specialist role or there's something, very unique about what you do. For the average Italian, the salaries are not high here. And I think that when you're working here and you understand things from that level, you definitely do look at things from a different perspective. I think it's harder sometimes when you move somewhere, you retain a job in your own country, you're remote working, you kind of have that degree of separation between what life is really like and your perceived value of it, because you are still able to compare things to what you're used to, the salary that you earn, etc. So I think regardless of your situation, if you are planning to move to Italy or indeed to any other country around the world, do some deep research. Research about the social landscape of that country. What are the economics like? What is the job situation like? What are the biggest troubles and struggles that the people of that country face? Do that level of research, because I don't think enough people do. They do the amount of research that is necessary to help them move to this country, but then they don't really dig a lot deeper than that. And I think that is a huge shame. And I really think that if you want to make a success of your life here in Italy, in any country around the world, the only way you really do that is by understanding it on a much deeper level and not just looking at the superficiality of the situation, and just educating yourself a little bit and not coming across so tone deaf, which so many content creators unfortunately do because they don't understand the depth of life where they live. So I guess my cin-cin for you for this week is, if you are planning to move to Italy or to any other country, please go deep with your research. Please try to understand the country at its core, not just what aspects are going to help you in setting up your life. And be mindful of the language that you use. And if you are creating content, the content that you're producing around life in that country, understand that, yes, you can talk about things that are not necessarily going to be relevant to everyone. Absolutely. There is a way to be respectful about certain things, particularly when it comes to money, when it comes to careers. Things like this are areas where a lot of people struggle in this country. There are respectful ways, or more tactful ways, should I say, that you can represent that information and talk about it in a way which isn't going to draw offense and which isn't going to feed into the narrative of Italian people resenting people coming from other countries, because they do exactly what I've just described in today's episode. I will see you in the next episode.